Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Prat, and I am a second-year PhD student at the University of Le Mans in France, where I'm recording from. My paper is titled Exploring the Semiotization of Reading Emotions in Text-Based Readers' Testimonies, a preliminary annotation experience conducted on a sample of letters of French contemporary readers. For this study, I have manually annotated reading emotions expressed by Francophone readers in a series of letters. In a few minutes, I will describe the annotated material, these letters, and the coding framework that I have tested for this study. I will then discuss the preliminary and overall positive outcomes of the annotation campaign, as well as its shortcomings. First of all, this study provides a preliminary set of annotations of emotions relating to the reading experience. If extended to a larger sample of analysis, this work could provide a set of annotations comparable with other text-based testimonies of readers' emotional engagement, as well as a solid framework to annotate them. Moreover, by exploring the semiotization of reading emotions in a sample of letters by Francophone readers, this work aims to contribute to the linguistic diversity of the field of empirical aesthetics. Before diving into my letters, I'd like to first situate my study within the current scholarship on empirical aesthetics of literature. I will also give you a quick overview of the research program, the ReadIT project, to which my thesis and this work contribute. As you all know, we are currently witnessing a surge of interdisciplinary research on empirical aesthetics, including the empirical study of various forms of aesthetic processing of literature. The cognitive and emotional features of aesthetic engagement with literary text, as well as their expression, are indeed a rich and fascinating research area. A research area demanding suitable data, such as evidence drawn from eye-tracking experiences or readers' testimonies, for instance, across social media platforms. Data drawn from first-person experiences in real-life situations appear to be particularly valid when it comes to investigating the language employed by readers to describe and make sense of their relationship to a book, a character, and so on. Whilst heterogeneous, the current scholarship on the semiotization of aesthetic processing of reading might benefit from greater linguistic diversity within the data. For instance, I've been very inspired recently by a study conducted by Vapu Khannas on the reception of Finnish readers of Canadian author Lucy Maud Montgomery, based on some letters that she had collected. Such works show that greater linguistic diversity in the data allows us to identify idiosyncratic or shared patterns of aesthetic appraisal across language and linguistic communities. This helps us identify universal and cultural aspects of reading emotions. The pilot study that I'm presenting to you today starts in the context of a project called ReadIT, which is also the main sponsor of my PhD thesis. ReadIT is a European research and development project launched in 2018 at the initiative of Professor Brigitte Rouvial from Le Mans University and a consortium of partners from 5 academic institutions in Europe. ReadIT aims to explore reading practices across modern Europe from the point of view of ordinary readers, by exploring readers' interviews, letters, readers' blogs, and so on. One of the main contributions of the ReadIT project is an annotation tool. This tool allows us to identify the main components of the reading experience, such as the reader, the reading resource, the circumstances in which the reading takes place, and crucially, the cognitive and emotional effects of reading. The annotation tool provides 5 macro categories and 43 sub-items, which can be further labeled by the annotators. Moreover, the tool enables semantic research, thus allowing to compare readers' testimonies across time, media, linguistic communities, and so on. As you can see, the effects of the reading experience that can be annotated in the platform include the recollection of personal memories, the production of mental images, and the emotion expressed by readers. The label emotion appears to be often employed by the annotators testing the read-IT interface and in need of a more thorough investigation. The label emotion provided by the read-IT annotation tool does not indeed allow, at least not yet, to capture the great variety of emotions linked to the reading experience. A more fine-grained investigation of such emotions might provide some empirically tested answers to a few of the following questions. Which are the different emotions perceived by readers? Do they coincide with other aesthetic emotions, such as those triggered by cinema or music? To which lexicon are these emotions associated? Does this lexicon considerably differ across languages, or do readers from different linguistic communities share a specific set of affective codes? It is with such questions that my pilot study begins. I am looking for some answers to these questions by exploring a quite unique corpus of readers' testimonies. It consists of thousands of letters of Francophone ordinary readers, candidates to the People's Jury of a very famous literary prize, the Prix du Livre Inter. This prize is awarded annually by a jury of ordinary readers. In order to become part of the jury, readers must persuade the organizers of the prize with a letter in which they describe their favorite books, the reasons why they enjoy reading, and crucially, the emotions that reading provokes in them. These letters are moving and fascinating self-portraits of ordinary readers and appear to be an excellent way of investigating the semiotization of reading emotions in a Francophone context. In 2020, we started collecting and transcribing these letters, which were stored in the National Archives in Paris in a paper format. At present, we have recorded the metadata of almost 3,000 letters and transcribed about 2,000 of them. The study that I'm presenting today is based on a selection of 10 letters from the first folder that we have transcribed. The folder includes 173 letters sent from the region of Pays de la Loire, where I am currently based. As you can see, the overall corpus of Pays de la Loire is quite varied in terms of formats and candidates. Most candidates are women. More than half of the letters are handwritten, which posed a challenge when it came to transcribing them. Intrigued by the variety of emotions that a first close reading of the letters revealed, I decided to select a small amount of letters, 10 letters to be precise, on which I could test an annotation scheme. I selected these letters randomly, and they turned out to be overall representative of this original corpus. The sample I selected features 6 handwritten letters, 3 typed letters, and 1 partly typed and partly handwritten letter. 7 candidates are women and 3 are men. The youngest candidate is 38, the eldest is 75. First of all, as you can see in the image below, I've annotated the letters with the read-IT annotation tool, thus contributing new material to the read-IT annotation interface. I am very happy to elaborate on this general annotation of reading experiences and on the content of the letters in the Q&A section if anyone is interested. But what I want to focus on today is the second part of my work, which consists in an attempt to annotate the specific emotions reported by readers, thus suggesting new labels to possibly enrich the annotation tool provided by read-IT. I have decided to label aesthetic emotions in my letters based on ESTEMOS, acronym of the Aesthetic Emotion Scale, created by a group of researchers in the field of aesthetic and psychology of emotions, led by Ines Schindler. ESTEMOS is, to my knowledge, the first ever generic scale to measure aesthetic emotions. It results from a questionnaire administered to several individuals who had been exposed to an aesthetic experience, for instance, a theater performance, a concert, or a reading session. The researchers aimed to categorize the various emotions perceived by the experiencer and to identify those that were common to all experiences. The result was indeed the first list of generic aesthetic emotions. As you can see in this table, Estemos includes 4 groups of aesthetic emotions: prototypical aesthetic emotions, pleasing, negative, and epistemic emotions, and 21 subcategories, based on which I have labeled aesthetic emotions within the selected corpus. In the conclusion to their study, the authors of Estemos encourage researchers with specific knowledge of the disciplines involved, such as music, theater, and so on, to further test this questionnaire in their respective research context, with the aim of pointing out patterns and variations in the perception of aesthetic emotions across the various fields. Answering this call for further testing, I am therefore using Estemos as a framework to annotate the reading emotions described by the authors of the letters that I'm analyzing. With its 2 levels of coding and its 25 categories and subcategories, Estemos can be considered to be a medium complexity annotation scheme and appears to be suitable for an accurate analysis of complex textual corpora. Several interesting forms of categorization of the whole of emotions provoked by reading have already been suggested. I'd like, for instance, to mention the work of Monique Kuipers, Franca Kemulder, et Tan and Miruna Doicaro on absorbing reading experiences, and that of Rick Bussell and Elena Bilancic on the different forms of narrative engagement. Nevertheless, I was looking to annotate the emotions in my letters so as to capture any patterns of continuity or discontinuity in the expression of reading emotions and emotions provoked by other aesthetic experiences. My idea was to attempt to use Estemos to first of all identify emotions recurrent in most aesthetic experiences. Secondly, I focused on the relevant segments of my letters that I was not able to annotate based on a scale of measurement of generic aesthetic emotions. In other words, I was looking for the emotions that can be arguably considered to be specific to, or at least typical of, the reading context. For this annotation experience, each of the 10 letters in the sample has been considered as a unit of analysis. First of all, I have identified all the segments of the letters containing the expression of an emotion. I have considered as emotions all the instances in which readers mention to be personally affected by any aspect of the reading experience, such as characters, writing style, even the fact of touching or smelling the book. Emotions can be expressed directly through keywords or phrases, for instance, I was moved, or indirectly through figurative imagery, for instance, I was tearing up. The sentence that you can read here in translation is drawn from the first letter that I have analyzed. The reader declares to be impressed by the way in which French writer Irène Lemirovsky constructs her sentences. I have therefore annotated this segment and looked for a correspondence in the aesthetic emotion in the Estemos scale. I consider the fact of being impressed as the expression of a sentiment of fascination, thus falling in the category of prototypical aesthetic emotions. Moreover, in the 4th column of my annotation scheme, I have recorded a keyword or keywords associated with the emotions expressed by the reader. In this case, the verb impressionner, to impress. I have reiterated this process for all the 10 letters. Despite the small size of the analyzed sample, some preliminary results can be drawn from this annotation experience. I was able to identify 67 segments containing the expression of an emotion relating to reading. I was able to match 61 out of the 67 segments with Estemos annotation categories. The matches concerned all 4 groups of emotions and 12 out of the 21 subcategories proposed by Estemos. I am obviously hoping and expecting to extend the range of detected emotions by using a larger sample of analysis. As you can see, the distribution of the annotated sample across the categories is rather unbalanced. Almost half of the annotated segments were matched with the subcategory of the emotions provoked by the feeling of the beautiful quality of the stimulus and the fact of enjoying, generically liking the stimulus. There were also a few segments that I was not able to annotate based on Estima's annotation categories. For instance, I was not able to consistently annotate the feeling of being completely absorbed in a story, nor the exciting anticipation of reading. This encourages me to add some minor revisions to the annotation scheme and to test it again on a more extensive sample of letters. I believe that this pilot study has shown some shortcomings of the annotation scheme, but has at the same time revealed its potential. Indeed, annotating reading emotions based on a limited number of predefined categories for generic aesthetic emotions really helped me pointing out what was missing, or in other words, what distinguishes reading emotions from other aesthetic experiences. As mentioned, I have extracted the lexicon relating to the various emotions expressed by the readers. I am interested in looking for patterns and idiosyncratic features of such a lexicon across different groups of readers, various aesthetic experiences, and across different sources. The very limited size of the corpus prevents me from drawing any conclusion on the lexicon for now. As mentioned above, I first of all annotated the selected sample based on the categories of the ReadIT annotation tool. This contributes to enriching the archive of annotated readers' testimonies, enabling more accurate comparison and semantic analysis across multilingual sources, and thus fulfilling one of the goals of the ReadIT tool. Nevertheless, I was interested in taking a step further and investigating reading emotions specifically. As mentioned, the ReadIT annotation tool does not currently allow any level of granularity in this respect. So, I tested a pre-existing generic measuring scale for aesthetic emotions, ESTEMOS. This way, I attempted to differentiate the various reading emotions and their corresponding forms of semiotization in a rigorous and systematic way. As predicted by its creators, ESTEMOS was only partially effective in capturing all the various nuances of emotional engagement in the domain-specific case of reading. What attracted my attention while annotating was indeed everything that eluded the annotation scheme, as we can suppose that this is what distinguishes the reading experience from other aesthetic experiences. If extended to a more statistically relevant sample of my letters, this could strengthen some hypotheses concerning the unique character of reading emotions and their semiotization, at least in the case of Francophone readers. Hypotheses concerning the uniqueness of readers' emotional engagement have been often implied in the framework of the French traditions of readers' and response studies, but they have rarely been explored empirically based on first-person testimonies of ordinary readers. In future developments of my thesis and of this work, I intend to test the ESTEMOS annotation scale on a more varied sample of my letters and possibly of readers' testimonies in general. By doing so, I hope to observe patterns and variation with regards to the emotions expressed by readers and their forms of semiotization across formats and genre, for instance, by comparing letters and online reviews, as well as across languages and linguistic communities. This is the list of references cited in this presentation. And thank you all very much for listening. I'm very, very much looking forward to the conference and to virtually meeting all of you.